protection rate, and of course a 5%, appalling protection rate, and in London even worse. Philip's in Newport on the Isle of Wight. Philip, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Would you like an observation from an old retired Met cop?
What do you think? Of course I would, Governor. How many years did you do in the job?
22. I joined the Met in 1964, so you can tell how old I am.
Right.
But if you ask any general, admiral or air marshal who it is in the military that keeps the whole show on the road, and they will say it's the junior NCOs, and it was the same in the police service in my early years. In those days, typically the sergeants and inspectors were ex-military themselves, and they kept young PCs in check. I'm not pretending all those days were perfect. There were negative and corrosive aspects like the Special Patrol Group and racist profiling and homophobia and corruption in the CID. However, generally speaking, and just like the military, the management backbone of the police service was enforced and controlled by those at sergeant and inspector level. And that's missing now, in my experience. It seems that you just have a degree in media studies or something such, and you end up on a fast promotion scale, and there's no control of the PCs out on the streets.
Philip, when you hear that in many instances burglary has been relegated on the list of priorities, and you may have investigated some in your professional career, and you'll know how much it impacts the victim or victims, how did you react? How do you react to that?
Oh, I can tell you how I reacted. My daughter lives in Walthamstow, and she had not a heavy break-in. It was kids, I think, looking for, the usual stuff. And she phoned up the Met. You can't even phone the local NIC now because you have to go through the 101 system. Mm-hmm. And she was told that no officer would come round because she lived in number 4. If it had been an odd number, they would come and inspect it.
Yeah.
It's a joke, isn't it?
It's terrible. I've got to get you. I appreciate it sometimes since you were actually active in the Met, but again, you'll speak with colleagues. Lastly, level of confidence in the current commissioner doesn't seem high among many.
Absolute zero, I'm afraid. And what worries me is that she was at Balliol College, Oxford, with Johnson. So I don't know whether there's any connection there.
I doubt it. Whether they knew each other, I don't know. But let's say that they're both in troubled times at the moment. Philip, thank you for that. We'll come back to more conversations about that in a moment. But let's address other matters. And of course, when we went through the newspapers in the previous hour, we reflected that there is still concern and indeed coverage of events in Ukraine. The US deploy around 3,000 troops to Eastern Europe in a major ramping up of Washington's response to the Russian threat to Ukraine. Telephone conversations between Vladimir Putin and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson taking place as well yesterday. So where does that move the situation? Let's turn to Conservative MP and Minister for Middle East and North Africa, and of course a former Army veteran himself, James Cleverly, who joins me now. What do we understand to be the context, or exactly what was said between the Prime Minister and Vladimir Putin yesterday? Minister, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. The Prime Minister reiterated the UK's position that the build-up of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border is completely unacceptable, and that if there were to be any further aggression, any further incursions by Russia into Ukraine, that would be a massive strategic mistake, and it would come at a significant cost to Russia. We've already seen the Foreign Secretary highlight an expansion of the criteria whereby we can apply sanctions on Russian entities and Russian individuals. And we're making it clear to Putin that this would be a very, very bad move, and it would be felt by Russia itself.
What level of sanctions are already being applied, Minister?
Well, there are already sanctions that have been applied because of the situation with regard to the Salisbury poisoning. Obviously, I'm not going to discuss what future sanctions might be put in place, because to do so runs the risk of undermining them. But by expanding the criteria, a larger range of institutions and individuals are potentially in scope, and we're saying to them, you need to make it clear to Vladimir Putin that if Russia were to encroach further into Ukraine, there would be very real consequences for those Russian individuals and entities.
Okay, just to clarify, I'm not asking for precise detail, but it's my understanding that as the President Putin has amassed 120,000 plus troops and this situation has gone on for some weeks, no additional sanctions have as yet been applied. Is that correct? And if so, why not?
Well, not specifically in response
But
to
why?
those
Why, Minister?
troop movements. Well, because at the moment Russia are, they're moving troops within Russian borders. And what we are saying is that our response to any further aggression, any incursion into Ukraine, would be met, and it would be met in a way that would cause genuine financial difficulties for both institutions and individuals within Russia. We're trying to persuade Russia to step back from this provocative and unnecessary actions. That's what we're trying to do at the moment. We're doing so in close coordination with our international allies, and also we are looking to support the member states of NATO in Eastern Europe to let them know that we are still, as a coalition, as an alliance, very much standing shoulder to shoulder with them.
The US has sent, it is believed, around 3,000 troops to the area. Is it likely that we'll send some kind of deployment of troops, Minister?
Well, we have obviously already reinforced some of our eastern.
I believe
allies.
we're in Estonia, aren't we? The UK.
We're in Estonia,
yeah.
exactly. With the we're there already.
Yeah.
We have training teams in Ukraine, and any further deployments ultimately will be a decision that will be made and announced by the Defence Secretary. But our message is very clear. You've seen this from the photograph coming out of the Ukrainian Parliament. The UK is one of the leading nations in driving the support for Ukraine. I know they're very appreciative. The Prime Minister has spoken with his opposite number, as has the Foreign Secretary. And we will continue to engage with, as I say, our international partners, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and its desire to be an independent sovereign state, which is completely legitimate.
But my question, Mr. Cleverly, was do you think there'll be more troops deployed?
Well, look, I genuinely don't want to speculate. I know that that makes for dull radio, but good diplomacy. So I will allow my colleagues in the Ministry of Defence to ultimately make any announcements on that.
It's probably best you stay the diplomat and I stay the radio presenter. Just last couple of questions then. We understand that 4 Russian military aircraft were intercepted by RAF jets. We have seen some Russian ships of late in the English Channel. Why is he doing that?
Look, it's really difficult for me to credibly assess what his motivations are. I think Russia is very keen to be seen as a powerful force on the world stage, and the point that I think he needs to understand is that actually these provocative military actions are not the best way of Russia being seen as relevant, as a serious player. There are a whole load of issues around the world where they could exert a positive influence. They're a member of the P5 on the United Nations. There's a huge amount of work that could be done for the benefit of all there.
Okay.
This military flexing of muscle is unnecessary and counterproductive, and Russia could and should engage on the world stage in a much better way.
A couple of other matters. Noting you serve as a Lieutenant Colonel in the British Army Reserve, how do you react to the news that the British Army are encouraging soldiers to pause in their routine duties, have a day of teamwork and reflection, a tactical pause so they can reflect on culture and inclusivity? That'll frighten Putin, won't it?
Well, look, I know it's an easy criticism of things like that, but actually the mental health of members of our armed forces is incredibly important. We lose too many veterans to suicide to take the mental health of our service personnel lightly. So I think it's entirely appropriate. It has always been a part of military culture, going back to ancient times. The Greeks, the Romans understood this.
Why do we lose so many then? If it's always been part of our culture, why, as you quite tragically referenced, why do so many former personnel seem to take their lives or have such emotional health issues?
Well, look, my observation, I do not pretend to be a particular expert on this, is we let some of those things slip. We let those periods of self-reflection slip, and we allowed a culture of kind of machoing it out and just toughing it out to become the norm. So I think it's entirely appropriate that we create an environment where members of our armed forces feel that they are valued, feel that they have the respect both of the organisation and their colleagues. That helps retention. That's good news. That keeps our armed forces as a top-tier global player. So I know it's an easy thing to kind of mock, and I'm not suggesting you're doing that. I know it's an easy thing to mock, but it's really, really important, that we look after the mental fitness of our service personnel as well as their physical fitness.
So Colonel Richard Kemp, who of course led British forces in Afghanistan, when he says it's navel-gazing and virtue signalling, he's wrong.
I don't agree. And look, he's had a much more glorious military career than me.
Than most everybody,
Frankly, I think there are people in the Scouts movement who's had a better military career than me. That's not the point. But the point is actually, as I say, genuinely, protecting mental health is just as important as protecting physical health. And if we can reduce the number of people who lose their lives to suicide in the veteran community, that would be a good thing.
Lastly, a lot of people might have emotional problems as their energy bills arrive. Minister, I don't need to tell you that will be added to inflation, other price increases, possible increase in national insurance. Is the government, are we going to hear later today from your senior colleague Rishi Sunak, some kind of help or some kind of aid package, Minister?
Well, look, we recognise the real world impact of some of these global phenomena which have driven up energy prices, wholesale energy prices. So we've already got a number of support packages in place to specifically help with heating bills. Obviously, we've also got things like the change to the taper rate of universal credit and the increase in the living wage, which will put respectively about £1,000 into the pockets of working people. But we are very, very conscious of how much this will hurt some people, and that's why the Chancellor has taken a very, very close interest, and we'll have to wait for him to make a formal announcement later on.
Why not cut VAT or scrap the green levy? That would help, wouldn't it? That's nothing to do with global prices, Minister.
Well, look, we need to make sure that we are able to pay for what is, I think, an inevitable energy transition. I've recently come back from the Gulf. These are big oil and gas producing countries. They are making plans to transit away from hydrocarbon energy. So these things are important. But we absolutely recognise for some people, these changes will be incredibly painful.
So cut that.
And we are looking to support in a targeted way. Better that we support people in a targeted way, and that's what we have been doing. That's what we continue to do.
Grateful for your time as ever. Thank you, James Cleverly, Minister for Middle East and North Africa, appearing here on LBC. We're at 8:32. News headlines are next with Simon Conway.
Millions of households will find out this morning how much their energy bills could rise by from April. The regulator Ofgem is widely predicted to raise its price cap by 50%. That would add around £50 a month to the average consumer bill. A man has been charged with the murder of a 19-year-old woman in Essex.